Hello, my name's Nick Harris, and today we're here to talk a little bit about Painter 2016 papers and what you can do with them. This is the paper palette down here, if I can move it. So that's the paper palette. I've already got it open. You can find it down here. Paper panels, see it's ticked on at the moment, papers and libraries. You can get to it through there, window, papers. Just had it open, or I just happened to have it open already. And this that is loaded at the moment is basic paper. It is the basic paper. And you can see controls here already, I hope. You have paper scale, goes all the way up to 400, so you can make the scale bigger. You have contrast, so you can make the, if I take it off, you can see in the display there, the black and white contrast is increased, so you can make it more pronounced, the effect more pronounced. And brightness, you can make it brighter or very, very dark. The thing to do with these things, as with most cases, is to try them out, see how you get on. Let's put back to some general default settings, get it out of the way. You see you've got two tabs as well, paper libraries, where you get a whole load of papers to choose from. You can always find more online, you can buy them. There are some freebies around, not a lot, but some. You can buy them. You can also make your own papers. We won't get to go into all that today. This is just a basic introduction to get you started. Now, did any of you spot I deliberately missed a control? Just trying to make sure you're awake. There's also paper rotation. Hang on, tooltip, come on. There we are, paper rotation. There is also paper rotation. Have I said it enough times? Paper rotation. So that's the start of it anyway. And we've seen libraries, but you also have a drop down at the top here, which has some more controls over. You can rename papers. You can change the icon for the paper. That's an exciting one. Capture one. We will do that. We will do that. Make paper. That's a bit more mechanical. That's kind of built in for what they've already got here. I prefer capture paper only because you can bring in photographic textures and then make papers from that. You'll see in a minute. And there's also invert paper. That's quite exciting. You've got a control for that there. Invert toggle. That's not talking about Boy Scouts inverting their toggles. No, that would be a woggle, wouldn't it? But there's also a direction toggle. That's the direction of the light. Click that, the light comes from the other direction. You don't see it in the interface, but it does. These will come into play. We'll do a bit of shading on this thing, and a bit of texturing, and you'll see how that comes into play. They're quite handy. So rather than just listening to me waffling on, shall we do something with a little bit of this stuff we're looking at then? Let's try and put some textures on these boulders. For me, I like to work texture separately to the base colour layer. That's my own personal choice. All these things are just ways I like to do things. There's nothing definitive about this. There's any number of ways you can do it, and you'll find much better ways and things that might suit your way of working better from other people talking about this sort of thing and tutorials elsewhere, or the manual even. Good heavens, I'm a bloke and I've looked at the manual. How did that happen? Well, actually I had to look at it to find out how to make a paper, which is what I'll be showing you in a minute. But to start with, getting back to this, we've duplicated the layer as you saw there. I'm on a computer, I can right click, I did that. Mac users, well, you've got your own special ways. Now let's create a layer mask from the transparency. Okay, That'll be the same in Mac. And it's made that. But you don't want to be painting on that. Or maybe you do. You can paint on the transparency layer if you want to. I prefer to paint on the layer itself. That's base paper. That's very exciting though it is. That's not really what I'm looking for. Let's go for something. See there, worn pavement. I've used that in the past. That's quite nice. Back to paper controls. Worn pavement might be a bit too fine. Let's make it a bit bigger. See, it's a bit more fractally looking when it blows up, isn't it? Let's make it a bit more pronounced and see what we get. Remember, we are just playing here. It doesn't matter. I'm going to use, this is a floating palette. No, it's not really floating. It's a custom palette I've made. It took me 3 times to get it right. That's why it's custom 3. See, we all get things wrong. I've got oil pastel saved to it. All this for how to make custom palettes. That's a tutorial for another time. It's worth looking into. It's in the manual. Gosh, I had to look that up as well. Now I'm increasing the brush size by pressing Control and Alt and dragging. That's very fine, isn't it? That's too fine. It's too fine. You can hardly see it. Not good enough. Control Z or Control Z if you're an American. Let's make it bigger and more pronounced. Even more. Let's see what this does. A little better. A little better. You see, it's fairly mechanical looking because it is a mechanical process. It's a repeat pattern. This is how these things work. But it gives it a little bit more of a stony feel to it. As you saw, that's the oil pastel I'm using. What I used to use more, when I used to use Painter a lot, the chalk, big fat chalk. Well, they call it real fat chalk now, because you get a more pronounced result from that. Look at that. Whoa, look at that. It's beginning to get more sort of literary looking, isn't it? Right. Remember that invert toggle thing I got excited about? I'm going to get excited again. Invert toggle, press it, go with a lighter colour, and let's go over there, over the top. And you're affecting the other parts of you have inverted the texture effectively. There'll be a small amount of overlapping, but you are now painting the bits that the other inverted texture cannot reach. It's beginning to sound like a beer advert, but I'm hoping you know what I mean. And look, that's getting quite a texture on it now. Invert again. Let's change the scale. If you start playing around with these things, you'll find quite quickly you can add interest. Remember, things in nature aren't, this is what we're doing here, aren't totally mechanical looking. That's the whole point about them. That's what makes them look more natural. It's imperfections. Things don't happen perfectly. So you don't have to be mechanically perfect on these things. In fact, if you are, it will look odd. I'm concentrating on scribbling, that's why it's suddenly gone quiet. You haven't gone deaf. It's probably a blessed relief for you. Told me to shut up for a bit. See, I'm not trying awfully hard, but I'm easily pleased. It's as you can tell, it's starting to look a bit better, look a bit mossy, look a bit. And this hasn't taken very long. Nowhere perfect, nowhere finished, but doesn't it provide a very good base for something to be going on? Going on from. And the point is, this is only working on one layer. You can add to all this by, say, you add in. Go on, add in. I'm adding a new layer. If I set this one blend mode to multiply, so it multiplies, and then I do, say, a watery glaze over the top, you can start building up the building up the volume and adding new colours, and suddenly you'll get all these nuances. Nuance? Sounds like some kind of strange insect attack. A new ant. A nuance. Back to the original layer. So your boulder jobby. Back to, let's go back to my chalk. Hang on, start from there. I'm in the right category. This is how these things are organised. I get back to my big fat chalk. I mean, it's a bit sizes to call it big fat chalk, but I know what they mean. I changed the scale, didn't I? Let's change it again for some finer detail. Use a slightly different colour, I hope. You can use a big brush. There we are. It's much finer. Because it's now set smaller, it's picking up more of the paper surface comparatively, so it looks like it's filling in more. Maybe reduce the brush so I've got a bit more control. There is no rocket science about this. I'm about as far from a rocket scientist as you can get. Very much seat of the pants stuff with me. And of course on the watercolour layer you can go back and knock bits away, crisp up edges. Then I would be tempted, I'll be just working on this one boulder at the moment, to go to my pencil tool. Let's lose this paper texture for a moment because I want to go to basic paper again. See how easy it is to switch between papers. Make a dark colour and start drawing a bit of definition in, a bit more shape, responding to what's actually happened in the very free painting bit that we've been doing, because shapes have naturally come through as you paint, and you can make it look like you meant to do that. Take advantage of happy accidents. The great thing about digital, you can always put things right later. It's more work and it's more fussy. If you can get it right first time, it's better. Same as taking a photograph. If you don't have to fiddle with it, it's better. Same with anything really, isn't it? Right, now for the next boulder, let's take the next step and let's make a paper, shall we? Let's capture a paper. I'm going to do it in a separate document just to keep things clean. This is the size I'm working on. This one, that's just how it's set. Let's go for that. Leave it there. I'm going to import a you have to use place to put a picture in, or you could just open the image, I suppose. I'm going to place it so I can play with the scale of it. I took a few pictures in our garden, very exciting now too, of concrete bench, looking straight down on a concrete bench we've got out there, a few plants, some bark. For this I suppose we're going to need the concrete. Let's open that. Obviously you use whatever pictures you want. To capture the paper, I read up, you actually have to have it on the canvas layer, so no, you don't do that there. So we want to drop it up here there. Now you get the selection tool, the rectangular selection tool, make your selection. It doesn't have to be square apparently, as long as it's rectangular it can cope with it. Now have paper selected, the paper's tag. I found that you can't do it with the library's tag selected. And then from the drop down, capture paper. Okay. Give it a name. I've made one. To learn this, I made one already, so I'll call this Concrete 2, because the other one is called, you'll be surprised to know, Concrete 1. Yeah, I'm nothing if not predictable. Crossfade. That's important. You know how sometimes when things are tiled, you can see where the tiles join. You want a certain amount of crossfade, so I've set it quite high, nearly halfway across, and hopefully that will be enough to make it not too jumpy, tiled looking. So let's try that, and then go to sleep while we wait. Now hopefully that will be in the papers library. There it is. Concrete 2, Concrete 1. Oh, I did 001. See, I can't even follow my own index system. Concrete 2, Concrete 1, or 001. So now we have two new papers. Well, I have just made one new paper, and you watch me do it. That's how easy it is. Now let's see if it's any good. Get rid of this, we don't need to keep it. Oh, I don't want you. Bye. Now we've got this paper to play with, which will act the same way as the others. Look, that's what it looks like. That's looking quite promising. That's made it bigger. Oh, looks like looking down to Earth from space now, doesn't it? Let's make it more pronounced. Yeah, that should be quite interesting. It's going to look different to the other one anyway, so let's go through the same routine as we did with the other one. Small boulders, duplicate, because I want to work in a different layer. I'll get rid of it this time. It doesn't really need to be seen, the one underneath. It's keeping it as a shape, really. Just I don't know why. It's a silly habit I've got. Bum, 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 bum. What was I doing now? I've put myself off. I was going to make a layer mask from the transparency so that I don't go over the edges. I just want to do this. Otherwise, you need lots of tidying up to do later, which you can do in a similar way, I suppose. But just to save time, paint on the layer, not the mask. There we are. That's highlighted now. Now let's get our chalky tool. I only do it this way because it's quicker to get to the library I want. Now let's do different. That's the original colour. Holding Alt to sample it. Let's make the darker colour more green. Let's make the tool bigger. Ooh, look. That shows promise, doesn't it? Different to the texture on the boulder behind. Oh, that's convenient how that happens to fall in a what could be a shadow area. Add in a few different colours, why not? If I change the scale while I'm playing with this, make it bigger, then it will compound the texture and make different things. Do you see the infinite possibilities of this? And how quickly you can do it. It's really quite an exciting thing to have control over. Or semblance of control. You're not really controlling it. That's what makes it great. You're looking for those happy accidents. Do the inverting thing. Let's also make the colour different, give it a pinky tint so it'll stand out more. Now invert. Now I'm just scumbling. Now that is a word. Scumbling across the top, just picking out little bits here and there, and already that looks quite promising. Go down there. Change the colour. Quite grey, doesn't it? Let's get a bit more colour than that. So you can play with the colour within the texture as it goes, and it gives it much more interest. You can make it any colour you want, and while it's done like this, it's good. Look, it's getting really more pronounced now. Now, if you really want to push it, I've pushed the contrast right up, invert, go for a much darker tone, and I don't want this all over but just in places. I'm going to do a couple of bits around the edge, really, where the darks are really quite dark. Of course, the smaller the scale, the more likely you are to notice repeat tiling, repetition in things. But if you mix up the scale, you can also mix and match textures, then you're more likely to get away with it. To not be so obvious that you've made a repeating tile. that's not too bad. It's not going to win any prizes, but it's not too bad. Did I manage to invert it then when I pressed it? Yes, I did. So I'm hoping that you're getting a bit of an exciting toy to play with here. Corel have done a good job with this. I mean, this was in place before, but they've done nothing to take away from it. They've kept the good stuff and added more good stuff. This was always a good thing, and it's easy as ever to use. So for goodness sake, if you've got the tool, use it. Play with this thing. When something's this easy and can be this effective, you'd be a fool not to use it. A fool. Let's stick this below the watercolour layer, shall we? Yeah. Oh, don't do that. You're supposed to be rubbing out. No, you're not doing it. See, it's still on that layer. That's not what I want to do. Didn't select the watercolour layer. Like I said, I do make mistakes all the time. The word idiot can be applied on a regular basis. Probably had a sort of neutrally sort of bluey colour, didn't we? That'll be close enough. What was I using? Wetting agent? No. What's that? Watery glazing around, that's probably it, wasn't it? We're not going for a finished piece of work here. We're just playing long enough so you can see there is potential here to do whatever you want to in terms of texture and stuff. You could say you were doing an alien, you could get some really good lizard scales and apply them, or whatever texture you want and apply them. Now, and I haven't really been making any effort to follow the contours of things like this, and that's something you can do more of with your brush strokes, and also with, remember the direction, that you can change the direction of the paper. You can do it something with that. You can also you don't have to have the thing conform. So say you were doing flat planes, you don't have to have the thing conform to the shape that you're painting by having a layer mask on like this. You could do it on a layer above separately and apply it, and then when you've got the painting done, then distort it to fit the plane. Remember, you've got transformation tools in here that can do that kind of thing. I don't need to show you this stuff. You can find this out for yourself if you don't already know. You've got hours of fun to have with this. This is just to get you started. Right, now that we have a good basis down for the textures on the boulders, let's tackle the ground plane. I'll set up another layer above the base layer. Pick a neutrally colour to put the grain in with, because we don't want it leaping forward too much. This is just personal taste. This colour is a personal taste for me. This is a photo I took down at the Wildfowl Trust in Slimbridge, not 2 million miles away from where I live. A bit of bark. Yeah, it sounds a bit odd using bark to do the ground plane, but if you blow it up big enough, it'll just give a nice sort of rutted feeling. And you will notice that it's a particularly grainy bit of bark I picked to make a picture of. And now play with the settings and the rotation. Remember what I said about rotating the paper too? I'm going to apply that now. I've angled it slightly to try and follow the ground plane. That's why I picked bark, because it's directional. You will find that not every photo you take of a texture lends itself to making a nice seamlessly tiled texture. Some of them just refuse to play ball, and you end up with obvious tiling. You'll discover what works and what doesn't. See, change the angle a bit so it seems to follow the ground plane around a little bit. Want to make the darks a little bit darker. And now playing with the scale so that it's not, it won't be so immediately obvious what the original sample was that we made this paper from, because elements will be crossing over. Now changing the rotation again, and the scale. So from one paper texture, one photo, so you take a photo that's quite nice and textural, good contrast and stuff, and you can make a variety, struggled with that word, didn't I, a variety of effects. So don't just think that when you've got a texture and you've taken a picture of a bit of concrete, as we did here, a bit of bark, as we did here, that you're limited to doing exactly what that is. Like if you've got a paper texture, if you've got a photo of concrete, you can only paint concrete with it. Be creative, experiment, try. Look, this isn't looking particularly like bark. Well, at times it will, of course, hint at, but I'm going to try and play that down. But I want it fairly rough. So I've got the darks quite dark. Push the contrast up. So you're playing rotation again. I haven't made a layer mask for this, so I just erase where I don't want it, because it's not a biggie. I don't want too much in the way of crisp edges on this, because it'll look like a cutout. Where things curve away from you, you don't get hard lines. Nature isn't like that. Light isn't like that. I'm going to combine it with another texture. I'm looking for something to work with it, to fill in the blanks. Really, you've got the bigger forms by using that rough bark texture. Yeah, I'm not sure how much difference rotating a manufactured paper texture, which is what we're using here, is going to make. I don't think you'll notice that so much. There would be cases where you would, but I don't think on this. And now I'm just filling it in a bit so that you've got a combination of textures working together. Again, this will help disguise what the original source was, but also add more interest. Play with these things. Find out what you can do with it. That's all I'm doing here. Bet you're glad of the silence, aren't you? Just considering putting a bit more detail on the boulders, but also by moving the layers around a bit, where I've painted shadows and things like that. I want the shadows, more cast shadows to go over things. But also I've turned the remember how we have two layers for each boulder, the bigger one and the small one. Well, I've turned the upper layer of the smaller boulder to multiply, blend mode that is, because I want to accentuate some of the textural elements, and I'm just fiddling around trying to work out which is going to get me the better results in terms of contrast. Fiddling with different colours. Actually painting on the layer mask at the moment, which is why as I paint with darker colour it's getting lighter. In case you're a bit confused by that, remember I did tell you can paint on the layer mask if you want to do that. It's useful to have layer masks. Now where I paint with a lighter colour, it will get darker. It's very perverse, isn't it? But that's how these things work. Painting with whites now. Because of the midtones and that in this thing, I'm having to paint with white to get the effect to show up. Now going to the big boulder. See what the original would like. This was the original painting of the boulder. Done the same thing, made a layer mask for this. And I'm doing the same on this. Just exaggerating the textures a bit. Using using the layer mask this time. The possibilities in these software like Painter are just endless. Whoa, turn to multiply looks really grim, doesn't it? Looks like some kind of strange mushroom. No, we won't do that. Bumping the grain size up a bit so it's more pronounced. Darkening some of the edges to try and give it a bit more form. You can see how you can play around with the paper textures and get all sorts of effects. Gone to a couple of still images here. Just to show a bit of development. Beefed up the shadow layer a bit. Now we're back actually live again. See, there's a lot of different papers in here. And depending on what you're trying to do, you'll find some work better than others. Try them, see what you get. And that, as we have done here, sort of, if need be, make some of your own. Infinite possibilities. I want to pick out a few details to give this this boulder a little bit more pizzazz. Yeah, I'm probably going to do a few highlights on another layer, I think. Make sure the colour matches in, lightening it a bit. Oop, that's too much. That's it, and just sort of, we're back with our big fat chalk again. Sorry, real fat chalk. And just picking out a few bits here and there. Just to zap it up a bit. Yeah, what other paper textures can we use for that? Some of the manufactured papers, actually, when you bump them up in scale, contrast can give you quite nice textural looks that don't look quite so mechanical, even though they definitely are. These are pressed papers. There are handmade papers as well, but it's still a sort of mechanical look to it. But well, that's not too bad. Gives enough of a sort of feeling of stone. So look at that, and gives a bit more form to it. Brings it forward too, because it's got other contrast and tones. So I got a bit of a frog in my throat now. Maybe a coffee break needed soon. I'll pick out the edges on the bigger boulder as well, why not? That's just picking it out from the light sky behind a bit more. Again, helping with the form. Still using Control plus Alt and dragging to change the scale of the brush, that is. Just learn a few a few shortcuts. They just save you so much time. And a lot of them are cross software as well. It's a bit more rounded, is it? And exaggerate that a bit more. Kind of a bit like it's a strange mushroom now, isn't it? Strange mushroom with a stone walking stick. This is all not very exciting for you guys, is it? Well, don't know if any of this is exciting for you guys. It's just me fiddling about, really. I do hope that you begin to see just how powerful the paper controls are and how you can use them, at least for sort of things like this. And put your own particular mark on what you're doing. Particularly if you take your own photo reference textures and then use them to make papers. You're seeing I've modelled up the some of the bumps on the smaller boulder a bit more now. I'm doing the same thing on the bigger boulder just to give it a bit of variety, so it doesn't all look like a uniformly textured lump of rock. Most of rock textures are the effects of how nature has interacted with it, weather, pressures, people coming along, doing things to them. I haven't inscribed any graffiti on this or anything like that. I don't want to look like people have been here particularly. It's not saying they haven't, but this is only an exercise after all. Didn't have a particular theme in mind when I drew this very loose boulder. No particular narrative, which is unusual for me. There's normally some ridiculous narrative going on in the back of my mind. Maybe something lives in that little crack underneath, that little hole. Maybe that's an entrance to a cavern system. Right. Slaps a layer of watercolour over it just to beef up the colours, and also then using that texture there, made another paper, the one you see in the paper palette below, to block in background for some foliage, and then I paint some details over the top on another layer. Of course, I've been talking about papers and I haven't actually mentioned that the brushes have grain controls, so you have control how the brushes interact with the paper, which is another aspect that you can tinker with. Like here, I've gone back to the texture layer, which is sort of roughed in the foliage that I've then painted over the top with details. But by tinkering with these bits, ooh dear, no, that's too much, that fills in completely, that's not what I want. Let's go back, I inverted it, but no, I shouldn't have done. And you can go back in and give the brush more grain, so then it will fill in more. Might be a bit too much. It will interact more with the paper. Well, exactly as it says on the tin, it's the grain. It's how the brush interacts with the grain of the paper. So you have so much control. Don't do that. Don't do that. Touching it when I didn't. Touching the move thing when I didn't mean to. I do have touch controls on my Wacom, but I tend not to use them because I find I'm moving things around all the time when I don't mean to. You see, I'm controlling the grain setting on the brush. really makes a difference how much the brush interacts. Just picking up the very darkest bits at low settings, lightest bits depending on whether you've inverted the paper. Turn it up. That's a 93%, that should have an impact. It picks up a lot more of the texture. So these are all things that you can play with when you're doing your texture. And I'm only using this for one type of application, which is to apply a sort of, no, it's not totally natural, but a sort of natural organic texture to rock. It's got much more applications in terms of if you're going to use pattern and stuff like that. It's a very powerful bit of kit, this. Very powerful tool within the Painter arsenal. Painter's always been packed with things that you can do. And it just gets more and more powerful all the time. It's a megalomaniac's dream. So having planted the idea of world domination by paper texture in your minds, I hope I've given you enough to at least get started with the paper textures in Painter 2016 or whatever version of Painter you're using. It's been there quite a long time with just as much power. And I look forward to seeing what you guys do with it. So with that, I will see you next time. Bye!